Hi everyone, this is Daniel Gregg speaking, and this is the 22nd day of Av in the year 6162, and I'm going to do a video for you today. The title of this video is The Abomination of Desolation, and this is a follow-up on the Daniel 9 series we're doing. Last time I discussed Daniel 9:26, the first part of the verse, and introduced the second part. In this video, we're going to discuss the same thing a little bit more in verse 26, and then we're going to go on to verse 27. In the previous videos, we discussed Daniel 9:25 and Daniel 9:24. Okay, so the title of this video is The Abomination of Desolation. And I'm going to put up the Hebrew interlinear on the left-hand side up here, and you can see the Hebrew on one line and the literal English between the lines. And on the right, I'm going to put up the paraphrase of the translation with all the common sense items spelled out in plain English, and then I'll go on to explain the meaning of the rest of the passage. All right, so here's the paraphrase, looking over on the right. And the people of the coming political leader will corrupt the city and the holy place, and his end will be in the overflow of wrath. And until the end, war is declared with great desolation. And he will have strengthened an alliance for the many, 1/7 period. And in the middle of the 7 period, he will make cease the sacrifice and offering. And over the wings will be a great abomination, making to be desolate, and will be until a complete annihilation that is decided pours out upon the desolator. Okay, so this is a little different than your King James Version. You will notice that in verse 26, we did reread verse 26. Yes, I did. I translated that as a coming political leader rather than prince. And this is because prince is a very archaic word, and it now has a very narrow meaning in English, which means somebody of royal descent. But in Hebrew, a nagid is a much more general term. It can mean a governor, a ruler, a president, or a king, or a prince. It can mean all or any of the above. It means somebody who has governing power, or what we would consider political power nowadays. Okay, so that's the meaning of the Hebrew word nagid. Okay, I'm going to highlight it for you over there in the Hebrew text, and I've translated that word here as leader, literally leader, okay? But in the context, it's a political leader. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to explain the word here. The people of the coming political leader. Okay, the people of someone here is used in a sense other than what we would call a genetic nation. It's used in the sense of followers. The people of somebody are their followers who follow them. Okay, and since we're going to find out that this leader is the Antichrist and is possessed by the beast power from the abyss, we're going to find that the Antichrist is the representative of Satan on earth, and his followers are those who take the mark of the beast. So literally, according to the prophecy in Genesis 3:15, whereas the seed of the woman would have enmity with the seed of the serpent, we are speaking of the seed of the serpent here. The final majority of humanity that elect to take the mark of the beast and to follow his customs and keep his idolatries will be the seed of the serpent, and will be at war with the seed of the woman, which is now the house of Israel and the house of Judah. So in the end times, this is the great end time conflict that we're talking about here. Okay, so a few remarks on the mark of the beast. It may well have a biological component and could well contaminate the purity of the human genome and link the followers of the man of lawlessness or sin more severely to the genetic creations of the fallen sons of God. All right. So the mark will represent allegiance and the ultimate allegiance to the beast and the Antichrist and the betrayal of God's creation. All right, so we saw a sample of this in the recent attempt to impose a certain biological modification on the entire world recently, and I identified this early on as a mark of the beast, not specifically the mark of the beast, but as a precursor to the same kind of thing done and proposed and promoted in the same spirit as the ultimate mark of the beast will be promoted. All right, so I don't say that's not all the marks of the beast that there will be, and not all the signs that there are, but it's going to be one of the principal ones, the denial of the created order that God created in 7 days, and then he rested on the seventh day. Okay. Okay, so in conjunction with the sons of God, I should mention that the Nephilim were the result of a mixture between the sons of God and the seed of man. So we're talking about Nephil genetics here, and impossible that could be involved in the mark of the beast, and it will not mix with the seed of men or not cling together easily because it's an artificial creation and it's not the creation of God. All right. Could throw in the word transhumanism there too. Okay. And that whole theme. Okay. Let's look at the Hebrew word haba here. Okay, so I have that marked in the Hebrew text over here. That means the coming. Okay, the coming leader. Okay, so this is a modification of the word leader, and this political leader we are talking about comes after the 62 sevens, after Messiah Yeshua was cut off. So this coming leader is a future person that comes in the future, and that's what this haba refers to, okay? And it's got the definite article, so it's referring to someone who's already mentioned, and this same person is mentioned in Daniel 7:24 and 7:25, and in Daniel chapter 8, which would be the little horn, okay, that comes out of the latter end of the empire of Alexander, namely the king of the north, which will be in conflict with the king of the south, and out of this the Antichrist will arise in the end time. Okay. All right. So next, let's look at the Hebrew word yashhit here. Okay, this means to corrupt or to destroy, and I translated it as to corrupt because according to the passage in Daniel 8, the sanctuary is not actually destroyed, but it's corrupted by the transgression that makes desolate. And then the sanctuary is cleansed or restored, or literally speaking, made right, at the end of 2,300 times of daily offerings, or the Tamid offering, which was a continual offering. So there were 2 offerings per day, so that was 1,100. The length of time is 1,150 offerings. Of course, during that period of time, there will be no legitimate continual offering, but there will be a sacrilege of one sort or another in its place. Okay, so this specifically is not the abomination of desolation, but it is associated with the abomination of desolation, which I'm going to discuss in a little bit as we get further on into this passage. Okay, so this passage we can only call the what happened in 70 AD as a pre-fulfillment. It's not to exact specifications of this passage. And in that case, the temple was completely demolished. Okay, so the temple structure on top of the platform was completely torn down as the Romans were hunting for gold and other precious items that they could find after the fire that burned it. But Titus was not this coming leader, and the Romans are not the people being spoken about in this passage. Um, Specifically, the people are the seed of Satan, of the Antichrist that is to come. Okay, so the reason that we're translating Yashit here as corrupt, and as I mentioned before, there's examples in Genesis of this word with exactly that meaning, is because it's referring to a moral corruption of the temple by the man of sin, and not necessarily a physical destruction of the place. All right. So the temple will be rebuilt when the house of Israel and the house of Judah are restored to the land of Israel. And the house of Judah is already there. But eventually the remnant, the chosen remnant, will gain the political power in Israel and will rebuild the temple. Okay, and during this period of time, Israel will be blessed like it has never been blessed before, and the promises in Deuteronomy chapter 30 will come true, and the temple will operate righteously and justly and serve in the teaching role that it was meant to serve to, as it explains in the same sense that I explained before. Yeshua's offering will be explained correctly in this case, and with conjunction to the Hebrew word lakaper, which means to declare to be a purging or to make to be a purging. I have some other videos on that, which you can go and look up on my channel and listen to. All right. Okay, so before the restoration of the house of Israel to the land, and before these good things happen, there will be an attempt. There is currently an attempt by the beast system and the spiritual powers behind it to take over the world and create a one world government. We know this as globalists, and the intentions of the globalists are to take over the world so that they can rule it centrally on the human level. But the devil's intention is to take over the world so he can impose his idolatrous religion on everyone and ultimately worship of himself. While the human components of this system may think that all religions are going to be hunky-dory together, the devil will just use this, make use of it as long as he can, but in the end he's going to burn it all up and demand that humanity worship him. And the only people that will be able to survive and stand up to this will be the house of Israel and the house of Judah, because a place will be provided in the end time for them to be protected. Okay, so this is at the final end, but before all of this happens, the remnant of Israel will be restored to the land and will serve as a witness to all nations, and all nations will flow to Israel and become Gerim and join with the nation of Israel and keep God's laws, his Sabbaths, and his feast days, and they will understand the teaching of the Levitical system and the temple, and it will all go together. And this will last for several generations before the final testing comes along. So I've created a chart, a general chart of this, which I can put up on the screen now briefly for you so you can see an outline of the events. All right, so you can study that a little bit, and I'm going to go on to explain some more about this passage. Okay, so as I say, the beast is attempting to take over right now and ultimately won't succeed. It's going to be dealt a lethal wound from which it will not be able to recover for several generations. Okay, so that when the beast, when the Antichrist finally does appear to fulfill the events at the end of the book of Daniel and in Revelation, its wound will be healed again. Okay, so this is the first coming of the beast we're facing right now, and then there will be a second coming of the beast, more or less parallel to the first coming of Messiah Yeshua and the second coming of Messiah Yeshua. Okay, so I mentioned that all the Gerim that join with Israel will share in the blessing in the time to come. And this is premillennial. Before Yeshua comes, he will come to be with the nation in spirit before he comes to physically restore the nation and rule in person on the throne of David in the city of Jerusalem. Okay. So, then when the time of testing comes, the nations will defile the sanctuary as described in Daniel 8:14, and then after 2,300 daily offering times or periods, the sanctuary will be restored. Okay. So I already mentioned that the transgression of desolation, which is different from the abomination of desolation, pertains to these offerings and probably to the altar in the outer court, whereas the abomination of desolation pertains to what happens in the holy, most holy place in the inner sanctuary. Okay, I should mention an ambiguity in the text here. So if you look over at the Hebrew text on the left here, I put a box around the phrase where it says its end, okay, or his end. And the Hebrew is actually ambiguous. The pronoun here can refer to him or it. That is either the leader, or it can refer to the Nagid, the leader of the Nagid, or it can refer to his people, his followers, the followers of the leader. Okay, and this is an important ambiguity because it says in Daniel 11:31 that they will set up the abomination of desolation. So that must be the people, and I think that actually the text allows it to refer to both. So actually, it's both the leader and the people or followers of the leader that will corrupt the city and the holy place. All right, so be aware of this ambiguity in the Hebrew. It cannot refer actually to the city or the sanctuary, because neither the city or sanctuary are going to have a final end, but the man of lawlessness and his followers, the beast worshippers who take the mark of the beast, they are going to have their final end. Okay, next let's look at the Hebrew word shetef here, which is translated variously flood, but more specifically it means an overflowing or outpouring, usually associated with water. Okay, so the shetef we're talking about here refers to the wrath of God being poured out on the man of lawlessness at the very end. It could also refer to the flood of anger that comes from the beast himself. So actually shetef refers to anger coming from two different sources here. Okay, so Satan will be wrathful at the end because he knows his time is short, and God will have to pour out his wrath in order to save the rest of humanity from the wrath of Satan. All right, so now we're going to, if you can refer to Revelation 12:12 here, and I'm going to have my helper here read Revelation 12:13 through 17. All right.
Then when the serpent saw that he was thrown down to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. Then the 2 wings of the great eagle were given to the woman, in order that she may be flying into the wilderness to her place, where she was fed for a time and times and half a time from the presence of the serpent. Then the serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, so that he will have caused her to be swept away with the flood. Then the earth helped the woman. Then the earth opened its mouth. Then it swallowed up the river which the serpent poured out of his mouth. Then the serpent was enraged with the woman. Then he went off to make war with the rest of her offspring, who keep the commandments of the Almighty and hold to the testimony of Yeshua.
Okay, so this passage that we just read is describing Satan's wrath as a flood of water being poured out on the woman who flees into the wilderness. All right, so next we're going to look at war is declared until the end, Milhama. And in that regard, I'm going to read you Revelation chapter 12, verses 7 through, I believe, 9. Yeah, okay, so this also is a passage from the good news of Messiah. All right. And there will have been war in heaven. Mikael and his messengers waged war with the serpent, and the serpent and his messengers waged war. And they were not strong enough, and there was no longer a place found for them in heaven. Then the great serpent was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the slanderer and Satan, the one deceiving the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his messengers were thrown down with him. And of course, there's a passage that speaks of woe to the earth because the devil has been thrown down to you. So this is when the war which has been won in the spiritual realm will now be intensified in the physical realm between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. Okay? And so the wrath of Satan is compared to a flood of water here. Also, Shetef, or the overflowing, is used specifically in other texts, which I think I've mentioned before, in conjunction with anger and wrath. Okay, so this is what I believe the meaning of this text is. All right. So, verse 27. Okay, so let's reread verse 27 here. Okay, which I have over here on the right. Okay. And he will have strengthened an alliance for the many, 1 7 period. And in the middle of the 7 period, he will make cease the sacrifice and offering. And over the wings will be a great abomination making to be desolate, and will be until a complete annihilation that is decided pours out upon the desolator. Okay. So let's explain the word make strong, or which I've translated, and I've also translated the word berit here as an alliance. Okay, our word covenant in English is a little bit too narrow because it has been archaic and it's only used in certain religious contexts as referring to the covenant of old or the new made covenant. All right, or maybe a marriage covenant or something like that. So it's gotten really narrow in English. But in ancient times, berit or covenant was used for treaties and alliances and contracts between people. I suppose even in archaic lawyerly language these days, it could be used to denote some kind of contract. For this reason, I have updated the word with the word alliance here. And if you look in Genesis 14, where the King James Version says that Abraham was confederate with some of the Canaanites there, the word that's translating from is the word berit, okay, which means an alliance. And some of the more modern translations translate it as allies, okay. So this is the sense of the word here. So this will help us not think of something particularly religious coming from the man of lawlessness here, but an alliance between nations. Okay, and in fact, In Revelation, he's the man on the white horse that goes out conquering. So at the beginning of the 70th seven, he's trying to bring all the nations into his orbit, and he will do so by inviting them into his alliance and or overthrowing them if they won't come into his alliance. Okay, so this is what this covenant here or alliance could also be described as the globalist agenda to bring all the world under one world empire, and particularly the globalists are working with the hegemony of the West right now. But I don't know particularly that it will be Western hegemony that will form this end times world empire. It may, in fact, be subdued by the rest of the world before that happens. We don't know. There's a current conflict going on between the Western powers and with the Western world allied against Russia, and then Russia is allied with the rest of the world. Actually, a more and more majority of nations are going Russia's ways right now. So this current conflict or contest will determine who turns out on top. Okay, so either way, it's not going to be good for the world. I kind of want to refrain from political comments right now about justifying one side or the other. I have definite opinions on this, but I think that anyone who's biblically informed and who actually reads the news correctly can tell where the justifications are and are not. Okay, but in the end, even if one side, which may be morally superior, wins, that doesn't mean they can't also fall. All right, so the it will be a great challenge for God's people in the end to come through all of this. All right. Okay, so I was commenting in respect to the word to make strong a covenant or make strong an alliance. Okay, this could imply that the alliance was proposed or around before, and it just needs strengthening. So we see this in two respects. One, the globalists will fail the first time around, I believe, because the beast will be wounded. Okay, but their desire to ally all the nations by contracts and agreements and in the banking system and or by coercion or canceling or whatever will ultimately fail the first time around. But the second time around, it will meet with success. And so this globalist alliance will be strengthened. And by the middle of the 70th seven, the man of sin will actually succeed and bringing all nations under his thumb for 42 months, as prophesied in the book of Revelation. Okay, so that's what this word. Let me tell you what the Hebrew is here. It is Higabir. Okay, well Higabir. Okay, and he will have made strong. Okay, so another comment on the Hebrew. This is in the perfect. I hate to use the word tense because it can be used in all three tenses, but this is in the perfect. Okay, and it's actually future perfective here. Okay, so and he will have made strong. So actually, you can end the timeline in verse 26. Verse 27 is actually a snapshot or a close-up focus of the corruption of the city and the temple. So verse 27 is just giving us more detail on the coming leader. Okay, so that's why it's translated and he will have made strong. Okay, so it's looking back on verse 26 here and giving us more detail on it. And then of course verse 27 at the end of it brings the timeline back up to the very end, or the end of the 77s. All right. Okay, so let's look at the word. Yeah, okay, so he will have made strong. That refers to the Nagid, or the people of the Nagid in verse 26. Okay, And of course, likewise, we could translate the beginning of verse 27 as, and it will have made strong. In other words, referring to the people that are following the leader. And as I said before, it probably refers to both. Okay. Okay, the many. I already alluded to what the many refers to herein. I believe that means many nations. Okay. Or many nations will ally themselves to him, and then the rest will be conquered in the end. Okay, so let's look at the word shavua here. Okay, that means if you look at the wav in the middle of the word shavua, this is a passive infix in the Hebrew. Okay, so it means something being seven or being of a seven period. It gives us the idea of duration here. So where Shavah would just mean seven, Shavua means something being seven. So a Shavua is actually, in this case, a 7-year period or the whole sabbatical period. It doesn't refer specifically to the sabbatical year itself, like the other usages of Shavaim could refer to. Okay, so it's spelled out in a little more detail, specifically referring to the whole 7-year period, which of course, in the 7th year, it has a 7-year or a sabbatic period at the end of it. Okay, so that's the significance of the wav in the passage here, or in the word shavua. Okay, so it is possible that, like Hitler, they're going to propose a 1,000-year rule or permanent rule when they make their alliance. Okay, so that's the human point of view on it. But in other words, they're not going to advertise it as a 7-year period. At least I don't think they would. Okay, but the scripture or the text here is giving the divine perspective on this matter. Okay, and the divine perspective is that it will be for a sabbatical period. I'm sure that the devil does not intend or will not want to intend to fulfill prophecy exactly as it is spelled out. But we see when we look at Yeshua's death and resurrection and the passages surrounding that in spite of himself, the devil ended up fulfilling things exactly as they were specified in the scriptures. And I see no reason to see why it would be any different the second time around. One way or another, God is going to make the devil fit into his purposes. Okay. So it's only going to end up being a 7-year alliance. Okay. No matter how they try to spin it. Alrighty. So what are the identifying points? A viewer asked this question, and I do pay attention to questions of viewers if they're relevant. Ask them, what will be the identifying marks of the beginning of the last 7? Okay, so I'll go through a few things here that will help us to identify it. First of all, as I noted before, most eschatological teachers completely ignore the synchronization with an actual or real sabbatical period or cycle here, and we went through that earlier. Okay, so if it's going to be for one Shavua, then obviously it's going to be years 1 to 7 of the cycle. Okay, so we're going to look for this alliance to be strengthened starting in the first year of an actual sabbatical cycle. So that narrows things down to 1 year and 7 in which this could actually be done. Okay, another identifying mark is that when Yeshua returns at the end of this 7, he will sound the great trumpet. Okay, so, and also called by Paul the last trumpet. Okay, so this particular trumpet is the trumpet for the day of purging, okay, or Yom Kippurim, okay, which comes on the 10th day of the 7th month. Okay, so this will be just after the 77's complete. This trumpet will be blown. Okay, so this day is also traditionally the day of the resurrection and the day in which the living will be transformed and made perfect again. So it is good reason with many have correctly surmised that the resurrection of the dead and the coming of Yeshua will be on this day. Okay, so notice that I'm avoiding saying Day of Atonement here. That's because atonement is a misdefined word, and I have another video on that subject. Literally, it's Day of Purging or Yom Kippurim. All right, now, so since it's on the Great Trumpet here, it's a Jubilee year when this happens. Okay, so further, we can find out from biblical chronology when the Jubilee year is, and knowing when the correct sabbatical year is, this gives us the keys to work through biblical chronology and find out when the Jubilee is also. So this narrows down when this can happen, and hence when the actual covenant or alliance could be made to 1 in 49 years. Okay, so there's a 1 in 49 year possibility as to when this can begin. So at this point in time, I can only speculate as to when this might be. I don't know exactly. I'm pretty sure it's not the next Jubilee, which will be in 2035, and I'm pretty sure that it won't be the Jubilee after that either, because there's simply not enough time for the premillennial prophecies concerning the house of Israel and the house of Judah, the remnant of the people who are chosen according to their faithfulness to Yeshua, for those prophecies to be fulfilled yet. Okay, so there's a lot that actually has to happen. Okay. All right, so another identifying point of the beginning of the 70th week, quote unquote, to use King James English, in Daniel 9, or the last sabbatical period of a Jubilee cycle, is that at the beginning of it, the two witnesses will come and prophesy for 1,260 days. And then when their prophecy is finished, then the beast who comes out of the pit will take control and enable the man of lawlessness to finally gain control of all the nations. And the two witnesses will be killed and lie in the streets of the city, Jerusalem, for 3.5 days, okay? Thus duplicating in symbolism the death and resurrection of Messiah Yeshua. Now, I believe these two witnesses are Moses and Elijah, okay, and Moses representing the Torah and Elijah representing the prophets, okay, and I almost toss in that Elijah was a convert. Elijah the Hatoshavi, okay, he was a sojourner, okay, which means he was a Gerim that joined Israel, but he was also the greatest of the prophets. I suppose we could say Elisha was a greater prophet, or maybe John the Baptist in certain sense, but certainly by the time this is over, Elijah will be the greatest of the prophets. All right, and he will prophesy along with Moses, who will bear witness to the Torah, and they will both bear witness to the testimony of Yeshua. And as a result, many will repent and return to the commandments of the Most High. Okay, so that people or remnants from every nation will be observing the commandments, as we are talked about, as we are told in the book of Revelation. So this hasn't happened yet. Most of the followers of Yeshua are in great ignorance about their inheritance in Israel. But God is going to clear this up and make it plain through the restoration of Israel what he actually intends for his people to do, how he intends for them to behave and live, and the correct teaching will be reestablished. The teachers and shepherds of Israel will be restored, and they will be shepherds after God's own heart. And there will be one chief shepherd, and that is Messiah Yeshua. Okay, I mentioned the Jubilee year as a criteria. You can look in 1 Corinthians 15:52 on that at the last trumpet. Okay, Messiah will descend from heaven with shout, with the voice of the one who is over angels. Okay, So the voice of the one who is over angels is his voice. Okay, and he is one who is like God. So Messiah Yeshua is one who is like God. And as such he is kindred to the Most High, having the same nature as him, being a divine nature. All right. Okay, so if you want to understand the end times, then you have to understand the appointed times for Israel: the Sabbath, the feast days, the sabbatical, and the Jubilee year, and and even the appointed times of the offerings, the daily offering, and you need to understand the meaning of these in order to understand eschatology. The Most High did not mean for his people to separate eschatology or understand eschatology apart from his law. But the reason he explains it all in the book of Daniel, in terms of his Torah, in terms of the temple, is so that people will realize that everything in the Torah is a teaching for us to understand. Okay, teaching to teach the nations by them, and to encourage the nations, as many as who are willing to listen, to join with Israel. Okay, so that means the covenant has to be made in the 43rd, or the alliance has to be made in the 43rd year of a Jubilee cycle, which is 7 years before the Jubilee, or in the 7th sabbatical period before it happens. Okay, so when the man of lawlessness, okay, and the reason why I keep switching between man of lawlessness and man of sins is because in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the Greek text varies between, there's a variant reading between man of sin and man of lawlessness, but they more or less basically describe the same thing. Okay, so the man of sin is the same as the one in Daniel chapter 7, verse 25, who's going to attempt to change the times and the seasons. And of course, this means to change the Sabbath, change God's feast, change the way a year is calculated, and the observances. He's going to try to do that. Okay, so that's a sign of who he is. Okay, in the middle of the 70th seven, he's going to corrupt the temple and the city, and he's going to cause the sacrifice and offering that has been going on for several generations before that, I would say, because Israel will be restored and the temple will be put in its proper place when it's rebuilt. He will only be allowed to come and corrupt the city and the temple as a final test for Israel. And in actuality, if you read Revelation correctly, Israel will pass the test, because Israel will be taken to a place of protection during this time. And it will be the nations that fail the test this time around. And so the protection of Israel is evidence that they are actually doing what they are supposed to be doing up until that time. Okay? Okay. So let's look at the word here, cease here. Yashbit. Okay? And this means to cause to cease. And actually, it looks to be like a play on the word with yashhit in verse 26. Okay, so we have to corrupt and to make cease. So being a play on the words, this is parallelism, and the one is defining the other. Okay, so when the man of sin, Yashbit, makes to cease the sacrifice and offering, then he will corrupt the altar and the holy place, or Yashhit. Okay, so we should notice this play on the word because it links up the two verses together for us. All right, now let's look at verse 27 more specifically. Okay, you see in the interlinear text here, I have the word wing in small caps. Okay, so the reason I put the word wing in small caps is this is my way of showing interlinear, because as some of you may know, I have an almost completed interlinear of the book of Genesis, but I've been amending it with specific passages and studying things. I'm not quite ready to publish it. But I use the small caps to mark any Hebrew word that's a generic plural, or it's used generically, but it means plural. So for instance, in Genesis chapter 1, it'll talk about the tree, the tree of the garden, okay? And the a singular word will be used. This is similar to the English word to say that the contractor put the stone on the driveway when really he has a truckload of gravel, okay, which is many stones, all right? So the generic use is when you speak like this, or the hail fell on the roof. Okay, that's also another generic use of the word hail when you really mean hailstones. Okay, so in similar, anytime you have a generic usage, it will appear in the singular, but it will have a plural meaning. So that's why over in the paraphrase, I've translated it as wings. But if this is a ubiquitous phenomenon in Hebrew, way more much in English, okay? And the commentators have unnecessarily stumbled over the singular form of this word here, okay? And therefore have not come up with the best interpretation of the passage. Okay, so the word wing, I believe, refers to the wings of the cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant, okay? And this is another reason why I think the ark will be restored here. Okay, so now we want to look at the word all, which can mean over or next to or upon or above here. And specifically in this connection, the word all is used as being next to something. Okay, so I'll give you an illustrative text for that, where you can find the same word used twice. Okay, where did I put that? Oh, Genesis 24:30. Quote, and behold, he stood by the camels by the well. Okay, so the Hebrew preposition used here is the word all. Okay, I'll try to pronounce the ein a little better there for you. So it means it's not just used in over as in a vertical direction, but it's used in over as if something comes in front of something else. Okay, so the man, let's see, and behold, he stood over the camels, over the well, literally. What this means is that the man was in front with the camels in the background. So he's over the camels, but then the well is in the background of the camels, so the camels are over the well. Okay, so it's in this sense that the word could be used. Okay, so to give you an idea of how this works. All right, so Paul says in 2 Thessalonians 2:4 that the man of lawlessness sat down in the temple of the Almighty, 2 Thessalonians 2:4, displaying himself that he is God. So it represents him as, Paul represents him as sitting, okay? And then if we look over in Matthew 24:15, it describes the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place, all right? And in Daniel 12:11, it appears to be treated as an object, as in Daniel 11:31. So is it a man or an object? Does it stand or it sit? That's the question. So these difficulties would appear to be reconciled if there is an image to the man of sin. And of course, this is the image to the beast, which we learn about in the book of Revelation. So there's the Antichrist himself, who is going to be worshipped as the son of Satan. And then there is the image to the beast, which will be the vehicle or the means by which this worship is rendered all over the world. Okay, so the difficulties would appear to be reconciled. That's my chai tea. The difficulties would appear to be reconciled if there is an image to the man of sin possessed by the beast. okay, which is stood. So the image will be stood or made to be upright. And the man of sin himself who sits in the holy place, or both stands and then sits, okay, with respect to the man of lawlessness. All right, so that the wings of the Ark of the Covenant are either to each side of him, okay, or his idol, or silhouetted in back of him. Okay, so literally over the wings. Okay, this arrangement is not entirely clear. Okay, and the passages allow for language variation for in what the ultimate fulfillment of this will be. Okay, but what is clear is that the wing implies the presence of the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, and I think I put up a quotation and doing research for this project, this explanation here. I went to the passage in Revelation chapter 11 where it talks about the Ark of the Covenant being seen, and I explained this in a previous video. It's possible to render the Greek here, and I have updated the Good News of Messiah to show this, that the relative pronoun, which appears the same as the definite article, is talking about the Most High who is in heaven, but the ark is actually on earth in the temple. So it's seen in the temple, and the temple is on the earth here. All right, so you can go back and see how I've arranged that in that passage. Okay, so it would be rather strange if the ark were taken to heaven and kept there and were not put to its original use before that. That doesn't seem right. Okay, use of it's going to be made for before the end, and of course there will be a time when it will no longer be needed. Okay, the throne of God is going to come down to earth, and of course the ark represents that. So after that point, the ark won't be needed anymore. And not only that, but the third temple ultimately itself will be replaced by the temple described in Ezekiel chapter 40 to 48. So the temple will be remodeled or put in a slightly different location. We know that the Mount of Olives, half of it's going to go north and half of it's going to go south. So the residence of the king, the most holy place, will be in Jerusalem, while the altar, the outer courts, are going to go north. So the millennial arrangement of things is going to be more expanded and glorious than what went before it. Okay, in the connection to the wings here. Okay, so the cherubim have wings, okay, which they cover themselves, and they cover the throne of God. And if we remember that according to the Ezekiel 28, and let me check the verse out here for you, 28:14, Satan himself is or was a cherubim with wings. Okay, so he would fully recognize that the place is between the wings, okay, where the seat of God would be, the presence of God, okay. And so Satan's desire and goal is to usurp this place. So either he's going to spiritually try to dwell there when he defiles the temple, and or his image is going to be placed between the wings, while the man of sin may be in front of it. So, like I said, I don't know the exact arrangement of things here, but there is a connection between Satan and wings also. I just want to point out. And also, I want to mention that these images of the beast will be given the power to speak and also to kill people that don't bow down and worship them. Okay, and now we understand why this is possible in this modern age with the development of artificial intelligence. And the only thing is that in artificial intelligence, once it gets to a certain point, you cannot be sure whether it's the human programming running the artificial intelligence or whether they eventually become possessed by the powers below. Okay, and of course, the only thing that keeps mysterious things like this from happening happening right away. It's because God is putting up a barrier or a prevention. He's preventing the devil from exploiting the human race in this matter when they haven't joined the ultimate rebellion. Okay, but when human beings join the ultimate rebellion, then of course any kind of deception is possible, and the images will become veritable Ouija boards. They will not be protected from them at all. Okay, so this is what is coming on the world, and our modern technology is going to be abused to that end. So when I see the nation or the house of Israel and the house of Judah being restored, um, we're all going to become Luddites at that point, and we're going to depend on God to protect us and not on our weapons and our technology. But the Spirit of God will defend the nation. And it will be this way right up until the very end when the Antichrist takes over. He will provide a way of protecting the nation, but it won't be by the sword, it'll be by his Spirit. Okay, so I should make a little qualification that when the house of Israel first returns, there will be military victories over local nations round about, but over the Philistines and over the nations that just want to destroy Israel locally. Okay, but in terms of the ultimate battle against the mega empire, the globalist government, the Most High is going to have to fight that one on our behalf. Okay, so I've been describing what happens to the ark and the corruption. Okay, and the comment I want to make here is that things were, if you look in the book of Samuel, where the ark was taken by the Philistines and they set the ark in front of their god Dagon, then the statue of Dagon fell down in front of the ark as if it was submitting to the God of Israel. And the Philistines tried to put the statue up twice, but the same thing happened over again. And of course, this was the warning to them not to mess with the God of Israel. And when they didn't heed the warning, they kept it setting back up. Then a plague broke out on the people, and they started dying. So the wrath of God finally went out among them, and then they had to send the ark from city to city, and still the wrath broke out everywhere it went. And then finally they had to return the ark to Israel. And of course, many Israelites were, when it was returned, were impious enough to look into the ark, and they also were slain because they did not respect it. Hophni and Phinehas had sent the ark into battle as a talisman, as if the ark itself had the power, and they didn't have respect for the God of Israel. And so this is why Israel lost and came under the in servitude to the Philistines for another 20 years at that point. Okay, and when the ark was returned, it was in a tent, and the temple and the sanctuary, as I mentioned at Shiloh, was destroyed, and the ark went in a tent, and King David had charge over it, and also Solomon until the temple, until the first temple was built. Okay, and then the ark was put in the first temple. Okay, but anyway, what God has shown through these examples of the ark is he certainly knows how to defend the ark, okay, and to keep it safe and to judge anyone who messes with it. All right, so in like manner, I think that there's going to be the man of sin is going to be judged, okay, for his desecration of the most holy place. Okay, and of course, this desecration will be so evil and so bad that I think in the wiping of the tears from everyone's eyes, that there's going to have to be a mind wipe about some things here among God's people in order for us to get over it. Okay, we discussed Dagon. Dagon means big fish in Hebrew. It's an intensive plural. Okay, so let's discuss the word shikutsim, okay? The word translated abomination, okay? So this word shikutsim is in the plural in this text, but it's in the singular over in Daniel 11:31. So is it shikutzim abominations or shikutz abominations, singular? Okay, so the Hebrew plural has more uses than it has in English. It can also mean in a plural of intensification. Okay, but it could be a singular item when it's a plural of intensification. So shikutzim, which I have translated over here, is great abomination or a great abomination, taking the plural as intensification. And this would bring it in line with the use of the singular shikutz over in Daniel 11:31. All right, so I did a little word study on shikutz and shikutzim, and this word is invariably identified with idols and false gods, okay? So, for instance, here, do I even discuss this here? Check my notes, because I want to get to it right away here. Oh, yes, it's here. All right. All right, so clearly this video is going to be pretty long, but there's a lot of interesting stuff in it, and I know you're going to listen to it. All righty. Shikutzim. Okay, so there's a little X in the Hebrew text. You probably can't see it, but that's the way I mark it. That's the way I identify an intensive plural. And the X actually means multiplication, because that's what the plural in Hebrew really means. It means multiply in some manner. So it can multiply the force of it, in other words, great abomination, or it can multiply the number of it. So that's how you have to think of the plural in Hebrew. Okay, so the word abomination. Okay, so that's defined in Scripture if you look up the other uses of this word in connection to Chemosh, the god of Moab, which was associated with human sacrifice. Also Ashtoreth, which is a female goddess, and Milcom. Okay, it's also defined in terms of pagan sacrifice and the idols of Egypt. Okay, so this is mentioned again in Daniel 11:31, where it says, they will have placed the abomination of great desolation, or of desolation. Okay, it uses the singular there, ha-shikutz. Let's see, ha-shikutz. Okay, to look at the Hebrew more specifically here. They will have placed it. So plurally, they. Okay, so these are the followers of the people of the leader, the Nagid, okay, that is to come, the Nagid Haba. All right, so they will place it. So this implies that the abomination of desolation is an object, okay, and specifically an idol or an image, okay. So this period of time in which this is going to be placed will be 2,300 time periods for the daily offering, okay, or the tamid. Okay, and since there was a daily offering 2 times a day, one in the morning and one in the evening, or one at daybreak and one in the middle of the afternoon, and then they burned all night until dawn the next day, and then the daily offering, two lamps to each day, was renewed. These offerings, according to the Torah, will be suspended and not offered during this time. But the transgression that makes desolate will happen to the altar in the outer court, while the abomination of desolation happens in the Holy of Holies, being measured by these 2,300 offering times, which amounts to 1,150 days. So this period occurs within the 42 months that the man of sin is ruling all nations. Okay, so this is not exact, but it's within that period. Okay, so the abomination of desolation is an idol, okay? And as I said, probably an AI idol that can talk and speak and is also possessed by the spirit of the beast. Okay. So, at the end of, let's see, did I skip something here? No, we covered that. So at the end of the 2300 time period, the man of lawlessness will be annihilated and come to his end. Okay, I think I'm going to discuss that a little later here. Maybe not. Oh, there it is. Okay. So let's talk about the word TikTok first, okay? Or which I translated as pours out. Okay, so TikTok, the verb here is treated as a passive, okay, in which the action is being performed on the object to which it refers to. So it's conjugated with a feminine pronoun, and it refers back to the word kala, which is also feminine. So this is the end or the annihilation that pours out on the desolator. Okay, the one who causes the desolation. Okay, which is the man of lawlessness and his followers. Okay, but this passive word we could also speculate. So you're going to have to allow me a little speculation here. Okay, and maybe it goes in the right way. It could also be an active word. In other words, she will pour out. Okay, and then the word kala can become an object. So she will pour out an annihilation or an end on the desolator. Okay, and in this respect, what could she refer to? Well, the ruach or the spirit of God is also in feminine. So it could be the spirit of God that's pouring it out. Okay, and specifically, Paul says that the breath of the mouth of Messiah will destroy the man of lawlessness. Okay, so the breath of his mouth represents the Spirit of God. So this is the Spirit of Messiah, or the Spirit that belongs to Messiah, because all things that belong to the Father belong to the Son, and all things that belong to the Son belong to the Father. Okay, and that includes the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh. Okay, so the Ruach is going to destroy the man of lawlessness, and this is why it's in feminine. Okay, so I think it's from some idea like this that Paul is getting the idea that the breath of Messiah is going to destroy the man of lawlessness. Okay, so he says that in 2 Thessalonians 2:8. Okay, and we can also so remember that the Spirit of God returns ultimately returns to Ezekiel's temple. Okay, but I believe the Spirit of Messiah is going to make his appearance at the end of this 2,300 daily time periods to his sanctuary, and he's going to cleanse it spiritually there. Okay, and he's going to destroy the man of lawlessness from that location when he returns in spirit. This is before his physical and visible second coming. So he's only returning in spirit at this time to his sanctuary. And the Spirit is going to cleanse out the sanctuary, okay, from between the cherubim where the voice of God appeared and his presence appeared when he spoke with Moses. It's one of the places he appeared, okay. So this doesn't mean that the Levites and the priests won't reconsecrate the sanctuary. I believe they will reconsecrate the sanctuary after that. But the initial cleansing will be performed by the Spirit of God, because the desecration will be so evil and bad, and the spiritual entities there are so bad, that it will take a divine cleansing to cleanse the place with fire and judgment. Okay? So, in short, Messiah's own spiritual presence will cleanse the sanctuary at this time. Okay, so if you notice that the cleansing takes place right at the end of 2,300 time slots for the offering, okay, which means if it's being desecrated up to there, remember that a sanctification procedure would take a whole week, okay, when the temple was not polluted, or even longer if stuff had to be removed from it, so that it can be set right or made right, as Daniel 8:14 says. Strongly implies that we're talking about a spiritual cleansing and fire from heaven that will cleanse the place. All right. So as I said, this is speculation, and the reason I say this is because this is regarding the future. All right. But I believe my speculation is well informed by the parameters that the Scripture gives us. Okay. In other words, following the norms of interpretation and not trying to impose some false doctrine on the matter. All right. And I think that Paul interpreted this likewise. Okay, so we mentioned Dagon. That's an intensive plural too, meaning great fish. Okay, and I would have mentioned there that in the passage of 1 Samuel 4:17, the Aharon Ha Elohim Nil Kaha. Okay, so the feminine, the verb is conjugated in the feminine there, in reference to the Ark of the Covenant, okay, which means that the Ark of the Covenant can be viewed itself as something having feminine gender. So when it says she will pour out an end on the desolator here, this can be representing as coming from the Ark itself, all right? But really, it's the Spirit of God that's doing the action, okay, which is associated with the Ark. Alrighty. Oh, and another reason I brought up this passage about Dagon is because this was the fish hat religion. You know, they wore their mitres. Okay, so now I don't think that the Catholic Church in the form in which we've seen it today is necessarily the form that it will have then, because I believe that the man of sin will want to bring everything into his orbit and to use religion to prostitute everything. And ultimately, he's going to destroy the woman that rides the beast because he wants to be exclusively worshipped. Okay, he wants to usurp all the religions, okay, of man for himself, including the fish hat religion. Okay, so I think there's a spiritual or symbolic connection here with Dagon here, because he's taken off the symbolically taken off the high priest's mitre, and he's put on this pagan mitre in its place. Okay, so the space between the cherubim contained the very presence of God, and from there I believe the man of lawlessness will be slain by the Most High. Okay, so I just think that's the best explanation. I'm not going to be hyper dogmatic about this, but I think it makes a good framework to explain this passage. Then the holy place will be restored. Okay, so now I'm going to present you the nearest illustration I can make about what happens. So enjoy the clip here for about 30 seconds here, and I'll make my closing remarks. Okay, so that was one of my favorite movies, and probably the best scene from all time, because it's actually quite accurate in spirit. Okay, but I think that when the real cleansing of the temple occurs, that nobody's going to remember this tale. All right, thank you for listening. Daniel Gregg, over and out.